Good morning, Husker fans. Welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Danny Gillette. And we're back here on this Monday morning after a big weekend of recruiting news for the Huskers. We had five-star David Sanders on campus. The Huskers are trending for a flip, and we've got some more nuggets about the Nebraska football program we're going to share today. But before we get into that, please make sure that you guys, if you haven't already, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button to the channel, get into the comment section, check out Husker Big Red. And with that, Danny, how you doing on this fine Monday morning?
I'm doing all right. It's Monday, so I'm tired, but we got a lot of news. We got the fall camp starting soon, and the season approaching. So it's never a dull moment to be a Nebraska fan, good or bad. And I guess that's the beauty of covering this team.
Yeah, fall camp 2 days away now, starting on July 31st, and that's basically a month away from the season. August 31st with UTEP coming into Lincoln. So watch out for those UTEP Miners. They took me to overtime in college football 25, but still got them through a little Malachi Coleman touchdown pass to walk it off. So
I have a Heisman dynasty with Rice going, and let me tell you, that is a challenge. I didn't really realize how bad Rice was, but the rice is not cooking in my dynasty. Let's just say that. It's more like forgotten hard rice that I left in the back of the shelf. So there you go.
yeah, I'm still not up to the Heisman. I don't want to play Heisman yet. So
See, I wanted a challenge, but I didn't realize that
I still get too
I drop
pissed.
back to pass, and the entire defensive line is already in my lap by the time I even press a button. So it's like, all right, maybe I should switch down a little.
It's annoying that I just hate it, and it's kind of like they do it in Madden too, but guys just like make the greatest reads and breaks on the ball that you've ever seen. And you're like, my tight end will be ahead of like the linebacker, and I throw it, and then somehow he just covered like 4 yards and picks it off. And then he breaks 7 tackles to run it in for a touchdown as well, which just adds the cherry on top.
Or when your 375-pound defensive lineman jumps 15 feet in the air and makes one-handed interception.
Yeah, it's like fun.
Well, it's like I can't tackle. I can't tackle in the run game for the life of me, and I've noticed that works to my advantage too, because like the run game is very overpowered in this game, but
yeah,
it's annoying on defense because you can't tackle worth anything.
No, I've found linebackers being a linebacker is the best, but I don't know, it's tough. It really is tough.
Linebacker, okay, I'll have to remember that.
Yeah, I've been playing with Javin.
One player and not like necessarily the entire defense.
No, I mean I'll switch if I have to because I don't trust the computer tag because they're worse than me. But I play a lot with. I mean, if they're in a decent position, I'll let them make the play. But
all right, good to know.
But I play with Javin Wright almost exclusively for the Huskers. So and then I'll be Nash and like Princewell sometimes, but mostly I'm just Javin Wright in the middle there. And anyways, that's the way I've adjusted my depth chart.
I'm excited to see Princewell this year, bringing it back to real life. I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table, and Nash, of course, too. But when you look at what this coaching staff can do in terms of developing players, I thought Princewell made a solid impact in his freshman season. So I'm excited to see what he does for a second act, so to speak. And I really liked his versatility and his speed and his ability to rush the passers. So I'm excited to see him as camp begins and as the season begins, because he was one of the first, not first, but one of the first recruits out of the group, the first group that Matt Rule had when he came to Nebraska. He committed, that December. So I'm excited to see how he continues to develop for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way he would have been here without Matt Rule.
No,
and
no.
He was one of my defensive breakout candidates. I mean, he did have slightly a breakout season last year, but I'm thinking like 5 sacks, 5-6 sacks, a lot of pressures. It's hard to get sacks in college football. So I mean, I think people look at sacks too much. In the NFL, that's more of a drop back, game where you're going to get that's why you see guys that'll have like 4 or 5 sacks in college, and then in the NFL, their first or second year, they have like 10 or 11. It's just an easier game to get sacks than in college. There's so many of the screens, and how many times are college teams actually dropping their quarterback in a 3-5 step drop? So it depends on the team. But
I know I'm currently running the triple option with Rice, for example, and like you're not getting sacks there.
Yeah.
Like there's just so many varied playbooks in college, and there's so many different schemes because I think there's a bigger skill gap, obviously, in college football than there is in the NFL in the sense of like individual talent. So that plays a factor too.
Yeah. But looking at this past weekend, we'll get into some recruiting here with David Sanders has been kind of the headline here for the past week or so, and there was a lot of talk leading up to it. Would Nebraska get him on campus? They did last Friday. Dylan Raiola put out the call for Nebraska fans to greet David Sanders, and I would say a few hundred. I'm not sure exactly the number, but I would say a few hundred came out and greeted David Sanders, who had a huge smile on his face throughout the entire time. There was a bunch of pictures posted by Dylan Raiola of him and David Sanders over the weekend. Sanders also took a visit to Tennessee. And at this point, after this weekend, I think it's pretty clear that there's a top two of Nebraska and Tennessee, going into that August 17th decision date. So in that sense, Nebraska's moved past in the past few weeks, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. Now Tennessee is the next team in the that's kind of in the sights for Nebraska, and if they can beat the Vols, then I think that they can land this 5-star offensive tackle. So I would say right now it's probably a 50-50 proposition. It feels to me like both sides feel like they're the leader. So that's kind of how I read it. It's 50-50 proposition with about 3 weeks left to go.
Yeah, and this is a good place for Nebraska to be in. You're gonna face competition when you're recruiting a player like David Sanders. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The fact that Nebraska is even in this position, I think, is a testament to how high this coaching staff recruits. How the recruits are starting to see the vision within the program, despite the 5-7 season, and also how the 1890 initiative is beginning to loosen up their pocketbook, so to speak, I think. And say what you want about it. We've talked about it before, but that's a huge factor as well. And, I think the combination of all three things, the vision, the players seeing what the coach staff wants to do, and the loosening of the checkbooks is working in Nebraska's favor right now. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee that they land Sanders, but I feel really good about where they stand, especially when you saw him get out of the car and have that big smile once he saw the fans there.
Yeah, there's a lot of positive momentum, and Matt Rule was talking about NIL recently, and he said, some people said, I don't believe in NIL, and he's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you don't believe in it? It's here, it's real, it's happening, so you can believe in it or not, it's happening. He said, I wish everybody would get the same amount of money, and I think that's kind of where he's at, but with the NIL and the 1890, I think the whole thing has been, get Nebraska in the ballpark with these teams, with these SEC teams, and if they can do that, then they have a legitimate shot of making this happen. And I think 1890 has done that. I think that's why we've seen Nebraska back in the mix for David Sanders and Michael Terry and some of these guys.
And Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher. That's the reason why they stayed. So there's that factor too. But what's the phrase? Adapt or die. Nebraska's adapted, and it's good to see. And I wonder, and this is the only point I'm going to make about it, how much Albert's held back the 1890 initiative. I know people will say, he's spending a lot of money at Texas A&M, but they always spend a lot of money. So, it's good to see Troy Dannon being really receptive to NIL. And for a long time, I felt the Nebraska athletic department was not well positioned for the future in terms of this. And now we're starting to see everything come together in terms of NIL. Love it or hate it, I mean, it's here. And if it helps Nebraska, I'm not going to say win a national championship, but be in contention for one, or at least get to the playoffs, then that's fine by me.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes with David Sanders here. I think it definitely, has Nebraska in the mix. But NIL's here to stay. It'll be interesting to see how it, develops with, the salary that's going to be paid out and things like that, with the new settlement, the House settlement, and all that type of stuff. Right. So it'll be interesting to see how it all works out. But in terms of David Sanders right now, I think it's safe to say Nebraska's in the top two. I don't think that's being too bold, and we'll see how it goes. There's 3 weeks left, which is an eternity in recruiting, but right now Nebraska's in a good spot. They're trending up. We'll see if they trend into that top position, but I like where they sit right now. We'll see. Talk to me in a couple of weeks, but in terms of other recruits on campus this weekend, Isaiah Mosy was one of them. Michael Terry is going to be visiting today and tomorrow, so we'll kind of be covering him probably more in our next episode. But Isaiah Mosy was on campus. He was at the cookout or the barbecue, whatever you want to call it, for Nebraska. They had all their you know, 2024 commitments in there. You saw all those guys posting pictures. Ty Robinson, Pierce Newberry, you know, all those dudes were on campus, and Isaiah Mosy was there too. His dad, Jamar Mosy, is on the support staff as an analyst now, and the predictions have started coming in. The flip predictions, you know, all the Nebraska guys, you know, Mike Schaefer, Sean Callahan, Brian Munson. I don't know that I've seen one from like Steve Wiltfong and those guys. I would anticipate that comes in the next couple of days. And
I haven't
Frank,
seen one for what it's worth. So
yeah, I would think it would come. And frankly, I would think that you know, that flip could happen at any time for Isaiah Mosy. So I could see that happening at any time.
he's been one of my favorite wide receiver recruits dating back to even last year. I mean, I really wanted him to, you know, be a Husker, and just his explosiveness and his ability to get downfield. He's got speed. He's got everything that this Nebraska coaching staff looks for in a wide receiver. And he's been one of my top targets, like I said, for forever. So I would be ecstatic if he came. It would just be another weapon for Raiola to play with. And again, how do you surround your quarterback and make him succeed? You give him an offensive line, you give him weapons, and you know Nebraska's done that. You know, so far here in recruiting, and it's been really great to see them build around their 5-star quarterback. If you want to keep a 5-star quarterback here, you build around him. You know, give him the keys to the castle, so to speak, keys to the kingdom, and that's what Nebraska's doing here. So if they land Mosy, I would be ecstatic. And the hiring of Jamar Mosy definitely was a strategic one by Matt Rule.
Yeah, he's ranked 246th overall in the 24/7 composite rankings. He took an official visit before his dad, you know, was brought on staff. So his last 2 visits have been to Nebraska. So I would think that this would be just a matter of time. So another blue chip commitment in the class, if that were to happen, which would be huge. That would be the first, I think, blue chip offensive player. I think all the guys have been on defense so far in this class, if I'm not mistaken. I could be, but at any rate, that would be a big get for the Huskers, and yeah, that would move them forward in the 2025 class. We'll see about you know, David Sanders. It's probably, I guess, moving into, you know, just a few kind of nuggets of news information, not a ton of stuff. But Jeremiah Jones, who's one of Nebraska's higher ranked commitments, I think he's like 8th right now. Out of 17, he posted an offer from Missouri, which is kind of interesting because Nebraska doesn't like its players posting, you know, the scholarship offers there. So, you know, Missouri, kind of an interesting team to watch. He's from Kentucky, so, you know, SEC territory. So I don't know, that I have my eye on that one a little bit with Jeremiah Jones.
I'm not surprised at all. I think he's vastly underrated. I mean, he's a really good player, and I wouldn't be surprised if more schools come calling. You know, I'm not sure about the, you know, I know you said Nebraska doesn't like their commits posting offers, but I'm just wondering if it's just, you know, a simple mistake made by a high school kid. You know, I mean, I'm sure they're all excited to get offers and things like that, but that'll definitely be one to watch because Missouri has a lot of cash. They've shown that they want to spend, and they've shown that they can get some elite guys. So as much as I'd like to keep Jones, you know, I'm definitely watching his commitment closely.
And we do have Jamarian Parker and you know, TJ Lateef as blue
Yep.
chip commitments in the 2025 class, just to clarify on that point. So Mosy would join those. So he'd be the 3rd blue chip out of those on the offensive side of the ball. So counting it up, so that would give Nebraska 6 total. So they'd have 6 out of 18. So I mean, that would be you know, 33% on the blue chip percentage. So that would definitely be a trend, you know, in the right direction long term. And then, you know, you start to, you know, win some games, and that would be a positive thing. And another note, I think, on the 2025 class, Cade Petrizak, you know, Matt Rule recently was talking about, you know, a recruit that Nebraska really, he said he would have, you know, lost sleep if they weren't able to get him in the class. And, you know, that's who he was talking about. He can't name names specifically, but that's who he was talking about, Cade Petrizak. So, you know, keep an eye on him. I think his ranking is going to trend up. And another, I guess, nugget that was reported by Sean Callahan, not recruiting related, but in summer workouts, Carter Nelson has been really impressive, and it sounds like he's going to play very early, as in right away at the wide receiver position. So expect Carter Nelson to get some passes thrown his way very early this season for Nebraska football.
Wide receiver is interesting. Not that I don't think he can fit there. It's just we have a lot of wide receivers, but we also have a lot of tight ends. So it's about getting your best players on the field. And Carter Nelson, I mean, we talked about this on our last show. He's not strictly a tight end. He's an athlete. So I have no problem putting him there. I mean, you know, you think about just the amount of weapons Dylan Raiola is going to have, and it's going to be absolutely insane. And then, of course, just looking at it from a recruiting perspective, you have Berteni coming in next year at the tight end position, and it's starting to become a full cupboard of talent for Nebraska. And one note on Cade Petrizak, we've needed defensive line commitments for quite a while to offset the loss of Ty Robinson and Nash, and now we have Malcolm Simpson, who's the top rated recruit according to the On3 2025 Nebraska class rankings, and you have Cade Petrizak. So they did a good job of filling in the holes there.
And Christian Jones is still out there. He ended up, he didn't visit anybody this weekend. He ended up doing work at a football camp. So there was talk he was going to visit Miami and potentially Oklahoma. I don't believe he made those trips. So that's where that kind of stands. So he's either going to make his decision in August, or it's going to go into fall visits. There's been talk about him visiting Wisconsin and some other programs this fall for official visits. So we'll see. I mean, that doesn't mean Nebraska's not going to get him, but that's another blue chip guy out there. So, I mean, if they could get, Sanders, Terry, and Christian Jones, all of a sudden, I'm not saying that they are, but if they did, all of a sudden you've got like 9 blue chips in this class. And that would be, that would be one hell of a recruiting class for Matt Rule in Nebraska.
And just looking at the defensive line position, to go back to it a little bit as a whole for this class, you have Malcolm Simpson, Cade Petrizak, Tyson Terry. I mean, you've got a bunch of talent at the position. And then you have some other guys, some athletes and wide receivers, Tanner Turch, Bryson Hayes, Jackson Carpenter, who I really like, and those lower-ranked guys who I think can make an impact as well. So you're starting to see a lot of depth at several positions, and with Terrence Knighton coaching the defensive line, I feel confident in that room's development. We'll see how long he stays, but for this year, I feel very confident, and it's just, a good mix of, talented kids who could really break through, and then you have the high-rated kids like TJ Lateef, Malcolm Simpson, Cade Petrizak, Jamarian Parker, those guys who are a little more highly ranked, and so it's a good balance in my opinion. This is a very balanced class, and it's really great to see.
Yeah, and it's interesting numbers-wise, excuse me, where they wind up. Like I said, I don't think they're going to get too much over 20. They're at 17 right now, so David Sanders, Christian Jones, Michael Terry, the Hawthorne kid, Will Hawthorne. So he's kind of still out there as another guy. I wonder if, the longer he doesn't commit, if he's going to be, an Iowa State, commitment in the end. I know that Nebraska's battling with them right now. So that's kind of where it stands. I mean, you look at the class, I think with these roster limits, the NCAA's kind of set that at 105, and it is worth mentioning, I guess, like baseball can be fully funded, 34 scholarships. Track and field is going to have more scholarships. I feel like Nebraska is going to be a team that's going to try to invest in some of those, especially in baseball. But as far as football, they're going to have that 105 number, which, and some of those can be reduced scholarships too. You can share some of those scholarships, but you can't go beyond that 105 roster limit. So that's going to be a little bit of an issue for Nebraska. I would think that they would fully stock 105 scholarships, but
yeah.
In terms of our recruiting numbers, though, we can't just be signing 35, 40 kids. So I think in terms of the 2025 class, I do think that final number isn't going to be much over 20. I think, if they can get Michael Terry and David Sanders and all these 5-stars, like they'll go beyond 20, but I don't think we're going to see much beyond that 20 number.
I'm going to say 22. I'll say 22.
Yeah, and if they could get all the guys, then they'll go. I don't think they're going to leave. Like Terry or Hawthorne or Christian Jones. None of those guys. They'll sign them, but I don't think we're going to see the board expanded much. Is my guess here in these fall months, unless there's really somebody who catches their eye, from in-state or something, or they feel they need a position of need. But for the most part, I think we're going to see much more focus on the 2026 class this fall. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, that's my thoughts too, because, they kind of already have the depth from the 2023 and 2024 classes, so they don't really need a big class anyway. And I could really see a focus on 2026, kind of pivot there now that they're essentially done. Once they try to get all the guys we just talked about, by the time fall starts, I could definitely see a pivot to 2026. They kind of did that last year, if you remember, and they really started to focus on 2025 during the season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that again.
So in terms of what that means for this show, I think we'll see a lot more talk on football going forward, maybe a little less recruiting, in the coming months. But we're going to have the next time we do an episode, we're going to have fall practices will have begun. So that's a really exciting notion for Nebraska football fans everywhere. The season, like I said, barely over a month away. So get ready, you guys, get into football season mode because it is here. It is time. We are basically in the last month. We are in the last month, the last few days of the last month that we will have without football for 2024. So get ready, you guys. Get your popcorn ready, get your beers ready, whatever you need. Your antidepressants if you're a Nebraska football fan, although we're going to need fewer of those this year. But at any rate, so we'll be back with another episode later this week. Check out HuskerBigRed.com. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.